let's do our duty first, please, and let's do our Pledge of Allegiance. I'll lead it this time, if you don't mind. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I was advised earlier to turn my cell phone off, which I did, so I'll pass it on to you. Please do. Does anybody need hearing enhancers? We don't have? No more. We don't have any more. Listen up. If we have any first timers in the house, I know we do because we've got a lot of people here tonight. Put up your hand if you're a first timer. Go ahead, don't be shy. Thank you very much for coming. And if you enjoy it, come next month and bring a friend. We got plenty of room. It's come to our attention that some people are calling and saying they didn't get notification of the meeting. We think we have a pretty good list of both postcards and emails. If you're not getting your information, would you please fill out the card that's in the back or tell one of us to make sure you're on the list, because we don't want you to not get the information. But I assume that since you're here, you probably got it somehow, so thanks for coming. You notice that all of our World War II vets have name tags. If you don't have a name tag and you're a World War II vet, please get ones afterwards. We have them every month. We enjoy seeing you being identified, so thank you. You know, we're coming up on November 11th. That's originally called Armistice Day, and in respect to the World War II, World War I veterans, and it became subsequently Veterans Day. So, I know we got a lot of World War II vets here, and we know we'll say that, but we got a lot of vets here as well. How about we just congratulate each other for being a vet? Also, another important thing happened this November. Sergeant Dylan Kreiner, where are you, please? Stand up and be recognized. There he is back there. Dylan is almost our mascot, has just had a birthday. Would you join me in singing happy birthday to Sergeant Dylan? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Sergeant Dylan. Happy birthday to you. Dylan, come here. In high hopes that you do the right thing when you finally join the military. You'll be the first one in your group to have your own 82nd Airborne challenge coin. Someday you'll realize that's true. If he challenges anybody for a beer tonight, don't go for it. And tonight, Dylan got himself photographed. You know, he likes to collect things World War II, especially knowing and meeting the World War II vets, and he took a lot of pictures and with other vets. If you haven't, we'll probably try to do it again next month if you haven't, but it's a wonderful way to get recognized, remembered, and it's a wonderful thing for him to carry on. So you got some newcomer. My name is Kirk Gibson. I'm the president of Motley Organization. We have several people with name tags on who are officers and going. We're all volunteers. I'm just going to mention to you, Charlie Lloyd and Laura Pasquella. Will you stand up and be recognized? They're the people in charge of getting. They're now in charge of getting our speakers, so we have a full slate out through May and even going forward from that. So rest assured, the first Thursday of every month we got somebody to listen to. Cliff Pasquella in the back. He's our co-treasurer, and he does all the lighting. Bob Watkins, our co-treasurer, couldn't be here. And then we have John Horn, our vice president. Ed Shofwell and Rich McCann, who are also directors. They're around here somewhere. And finally, Rich Burton, who is our secretary, and an absolute bird. He makes us do what we need to do. And I think he has 9 report.
Next Thursday, we Vietnam veterans run a Vietnam roundtable. It's at 8000 Dairy Street, and I have the flyers for the rest of this year and all of next year. So next Thursday, we're going to have a door gunner, helicopter door gunner, George Metz, coming in from Pittsburgh. So that's at 7:30 next Thursday at 8000 Dairy Street, the Vietnam Veterans Hall there.
Thank you. We have another couple of notes. Bill Jackson has something of note. Everybody knows Bill Jackson.
Yeah, back from Cancun, yes. Well, as many of you old members know, we until we outgrew it, we used to meet at Country Meadows over in Hershey. And every year on Veterans Day or a day before, a day after, they would treat us to a breakfast. And I had a call from Kathy Cox, who used to be our host for that event. And she said that since we've moved, their mailing list is getting old, and a lot of the people who they'd like to have come aren't on that mailing list. So she gave me a bunch of invitations. It's Monday, November 10th at 1:45 in the afternoon. They have the Dauphin County Firing Squad. We'll raise the flag. We have some music. We'll have tributes to veterans. Some food, and it says beverages, which I'm hoping means some beer. I don't know. But anyway, any of you who are veterans that would like to come, I've got invitations here. The only thing they ask is you call them and tell them what branch of service you were in. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And Jerry Figgins has an announcement of gentleman's rep. You can sit down.
I have a friend who flew B-17s over to Germany during World War II, and his children wanted him to write up his experiences, but he doesn't type. So I researched it for him, and there's a product out, a software product called Dragon, and Dragon software converts speech to the typed word. In other words, you talk into the computer does the typing for you. Okay, and the one model sells the Dragon 13 Home 2, which I researched and found a flyer on that, sells for $100. One of my friends told me there's Walmart has a version, I don't know which version it is, Dragon for $50. Anyway, $50. Dragon is an answer for those who want to get their experiences into type form, whether you're going to publish it like I published a book recently, or whether you just want to get it out for your friends. Or when your grandkids ask you, what'd you do in the war, Daddy? You just hand them a copy of your write-up. Okay? I'm serious when I say that, because some people cannot be around when they're going through the write-up together, because they get so emotional and they have bad dreams, nightmares. So they don't mind you reading it, but don't discuss it with them, okay? Because of the emotional involvement. Okay, so the key word is Dragon 13, Home 2. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. I'll have to fire my stenographer. I mentioned last month that Angela Graduloff of Hershey High School is running a program. Is she here tonight? Angela, you here? Oh no, she couldn't be here. She's being inducted into something else. So I'll say it for her. If you recall, on the 14th, Friday it is, she would like to have vets come to the large group instruction room at Hershey High School and be dispersed through the classrooms to talk about military experiences to the kids there at the high school. She has, this is based on the Take a Vet to School that PBS did with the West Virginia school when she was there. She said it's tremendously successful. And as Jerry knows, kids aren't taught much about the military or the wars anymore. So it's a great way to share your experiences. They don't have to be any more than where you were, what you did, why you joined, and what you did since. And I think it would be very appreciative. So, I'll say it again, I'm going to leave a page here that has a little room for sign up if you want to sign up. I'll leave it up back. And also, Rich Burton is going to be a part of it, so you give him your name, but all you do is just show up. But she'd like to have some idea of how many, so please don't just show up if you can leave your name if you want to do it. It's Friday. It ought to be a lot of fun. 11:30, Hershey High School. Thank you. We received some book contributions tonight. We're not having a book sale tonight because our head book salesman, Bob Watkins, isn't here, but thank you very much for your contributions, and we look forward to more. Remember that Bev Barb is our dining captain. You must call her. I'm told that for some people it's a long distance call. You can call any one of us and we'll get the message to her. I don't know how you find out what our numbers are, but Rich's number is pretty easy to find. It's on our cards, so if we have it up there. Or most of you know somebody around here who can call down to Lancaster for you.
And there's now a sign-up sheet for next month's dinner out on the table.
Excellent. The sign-up sheet for next month's dinner is out on the table. I understand we had quite a good crowd there tonight. So, good. Charlie, would you like to bring us up to date on what you're doing with Dan Olmsted? Remember we talked about the guy from the National World War II Museum down in New Orleans? Well, he's coming up. He came up, worked with Bev, and did some of the stuff down in Lancaster. Rather than tell you about it, I'll let Charlie do it.
Thank you very much. Dan Olmsted is the representative for the World War II National Museum in New Orleans. And he came up 2 weeks ago, interviewing vets for where they are. If they're in their home or wherever they are, he comes and interviews the vets himself. It takes about 45 minutes, and he does 4 a day. And those oral histories go into our National Archives. He's been up once, and he did 4 in Lancaster. He's coming up next week. We've got another 4 in Lancaster. And did you say Bev was here or not? I don't see her.
No.
But Bev Bark has contacted over 50-some veterans in this market who would like to tell their stories and have them recorded. So if you have an inclination to tell your story, now is the time to do it. We'll be coming in over the next couple months, and they do a very, very good job. Along with that, we have a oral history that's done locally with the schools, and we have George Stefanoff here, and he has some students who are also participating. And I thought it'd be nice if we take a moment to have George come up and introduce his students.
Thank you. My name is Steph Chortnoff, history teacher at Lower Dauphin High School. Just wanted to raise awareness again that for the last 2 years, we've been working with the U.S. Army Heritage and Education Center in Carlisle through Rick McCann's connection there for some of our History Honor Society students to conduct oral histories of World War II veterans or any era. It doesn't have to be combat, it doesn't have to be a male, it doesn't have to be deployed overseas. But there are a series of surveys or questionnaires that are already prepared by the U.S. Army Heritage and Education Center facility. We would use those surveys, and the students conduct the oral history and digitally record the voice dialogue, not necessarily handwriting every word or having to capture that in writing. So I just wanted to raise awareness that we have a number of students in the back of the room here who are interested in history, who've been able to find some time to come here and listen to some great stories, and I just wanted to recognize them, raise awareness about our own oral history project with the Heritage Center in Carlisle, and that is also stored there as well as in the Library of Congress, and it's a wonderful opportunity for our kids. So if you're interested in sharing your story, again, I'm Steph Chortnoff, Lower Dauphin High School, and I'd love to get some advice from you or maybe have our students interview you. All right, thank you.
In tandem with that, we're reaching for other groups. Lancaster and Allentown have oral history groups, and we've been traveling back and forth. Dan Mastros has the Lancaster group. We've been supplying him with some speakers, and then we're getting speakers from them. So we're building this organization so we can get more people and more people speaking. So we're in the process of that now. Allentown is the Lehigh Valley with Mike Stewart, and they have a group not quite our size, but they also have been working with us. You mentioned Bev on the dining room cabinet. She's doing a great job calling, and it helps us get everything ready for the church when they make their dinners. I'd like to echo what Kirk said, and that is postcards. We have the postcards. I have a list up there. If you have any problem getting a postcard, please come to me, and I'll make sure it's on the list properly. We'd like to get that out. And the other thing is we have name tags for the veterans, and we're making them up. We would like to have you guys turn them in at the door, and then we'll have them ready for the next time. And I'd like to have a volunteer from the audience who would stand at the door tonight and take these, hook up Benny LaRue. Would you do that, Benny?
Yes.
Okay, so look for Benny at the door. He'll be picking up your veteran badges, and we'll save them for you for the next time.
Okay, tap in next week.
Well, if you want to get into that, Benny was a wingback. You guys don't remember football in those days. He was a wingback in Susquehanna Township. I think he scored more points than anybody else. You know he scored more points against a school called Hummelstown. And the fact be known, he was actually in effigy here. Just trying to make friends for you, Ben, that's all. Do it, on your way out. Okay?
Okay, one more quick announcement, and then we'll get to the speaker.
I just noticed in the Lebanon Daily News yesterday that there'll be a book signing at the Lebanon Historical Society located at 924 Cumberland Street in Lebanon. The book signing is by Colonel Cole Kingseed, whose most recent book is about Dick Winters. It's called Conversations with Major Dick Winters, Life Lessons from the Commander of the Band of Brothers. So that's on Saturday, November the 8th, from 1 to 3 at the Lebanon County Historical Society. They didn't mention the price of the name of the book, so I'm not sure what the book sells for.
We'll find out. Thank you. Charlie?
Thank you very much.
Charlie's done a wonderful job. I'm going to get bust on Charlie, bragging on Charlie. He's done a wonderful job in his taking over recruiting and interviewing speakers and getting them all prepped up and ready to go. So I'm sure this will be a wonderful evening because you did it. Thank you, Charlie.
Well, thank you. Do I get a 1099 now?
No.
Yeah. I'd like to tell you a little bit about who's going to be the speakers moving forward. December the 4th, we have Major Nathan Klein from Allentown. I mentioned the Lehigh Valley group. And he has 65 missions, B-26 Marauder bomber. And we have quite a biography on him. In January, we have Dr. Hurt, who's an Auschwitz survivor from Adamstown. February 5th, we have our own Dick Boyd sitting right over here. Looking forward to that, Dick. It was an RAF command pilot in Lancaster Bombers, and we look forward to having his story. March the 5th, we got a retired Navy commander on staff at Carlisle, and he's going to discuss the war in the Atlantic and convoy systems. I'm anxious to meet him. I lost a cousin in a ship that went down in the North Atlantic, much like Mr. Campbell was here, same way. And then in April, we have Wally Clark from York, who is a sergeant machine gunner at Battle of Balls. So we have a pretty exciting list of people coming. Tonight we have a very exciting speaker, and I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce Helga. Helga Rist. And I'm going to start from here. Camp Hill, born in Frankfurt, on the River Oder. Was that right? Oder. She grew up as a teenager under the Hitler regime, surviving the ravages of World War II. The family suffered brutally as subjects of the new Soviet occupation, where any and all things of value, including food, were shipped to Russia. Her family was allotted only a small loaf of bread and a cup of jam per person per week, forcing the German population into deprivation and starvation. In December 48, Rist was arrested by the, I said KGB, but I've been corrected. It's the KNVD. One of our fellows here told me that. But a year later it became the KGB, so it wasn't too bad. Secret Service. See, that's secret police, really, right? Yes. She was arrested under false charges of spying against the Soviets, sentencing her and 26 schoolmates to 25 years hard labor in prisons and concentration camps. Signing a forced confession under duress probably saved her life. The saga of her struggle to survive echoes the cruelties of those who were incarcerated unjustly. She released from prison in 55, studied at Johann Wolfgang Goethe University, earning her master's in English and geography, arriving here in 61. She began her teaching career here in Lower Dauphin. She taught for German for 33 years. And then she completed her long and successful career in education by serving as adjunct professor at Wilson College, which we know is one of the most highly rated liberal colleges in this area. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to our speaker, Helga Rist.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm very honored to be selected as a speaker here for you. But before I can talk about my own experiences, I have to give you a little bit background because otherwise you wouldn't understand why this all happened. You all know that Germany was divided in 4 parts after World War II. The American part and the British part in the north, the French part and the Soviet part. These 3 western portions of Germany, they later united and became West Germany. In West Germany rose out of the ashes like a phoenix. It was just unbelievable how quickly West Germany was able to remove all the rebels, and all the big cities were 60, 70, 80, and some of them 90%, like Frankfurt and Hamburg, 90% in rebels. But the enormous help that West Germany got financially from the Americans, the French, and the British, especially the Americans, that helped West Germany to recover so very quickly. You may remember the Marshall Plan, which was a big, big help for West Germany. In the eastern part, the Soviet part, it was quite the opposite. There was no help. We were treated as slaves. They removed all machines from the factories. They removed small tools from small shops. Whatever they could find, it was packed and sent to the Soviet Union. They ripped up railroad tracks where there were several tracks. They ripped up the tracks to melt in the steel. They sent them to the Soviet Union where they were melted in and only left 1 track everywhere. That means, for example, between Berlin and Frankfurt-Oder, where I grew up, it's about, Frankfurt is about 60 miles or so east of Berlin. And between Frankfurt and Berlin, there was a very active railroad traffic. But there was only now one train that could go on this one track. One goes to Berlin, one comes from Berlin. And once a day, because they didn't give them any more fuel or anything to work on. As you just heard, we got, all the shops were closed because they had taken everything out of the shops and used it for the Soviet Union, for themselves. They used all the foods that they could find for feeding their own Soviet army. They had a very, very strong prohibition against a law against the Germans selling any food like the farmers to Germans because they wanted all their products for themselves. That was especially for potatoes because they wanted to make their vodka from the potatoes. The only thing the German population got to eat is what you just heard. One bread of that size, 1 cup of jam per person per week. Of course, nobody can survive on something like this for any length of time. And so especially the babies, the mothers didn't have any milk for the babies. The mothers or children didn't get anything else. Especially the babies and the old people starved to death, including my own grandmother. And we couldn't help. My mother and I never had brothers or sisters. My mother and I, we got the same thing, 1 bread and 1 cup of jam. We went out at night, my mother and I, and we stole food from the fields wherever we could find anything, and we then left money. The fields in Germany are usually around the farmer's house, and so you know whom the fields belong to. And we left some money. We had money to burn, but you couldn't buy anything with it. So we left money in the farmers' houses, and they looked away. They much rather had us stealing the food than, not for the money, but not to give it to the Soviets. So we never had any problems with that. We also ate tender leaves of dandelions and looked for mushrooms or something, or wild berries or something like this in the woods. But these little things on the side, they couldn't keep my grandmother alive. They could barely keep us alive. We were alone. My father wasn't there because we had no idea where he was. He was in the army, and of course, during the end of the war, there was nothing, no communication, no telephone, no mail or anything else. So we didn't know where he was. He survived, but we saw him much, much later. At the critical time in the beginning, it was just Mom and me. With these circumstances, how the Soviets treated all of us, you can imagine the hatred amongst the people against the Soviets. And like always in the world, the young people, the young generation, is the most enthusiastic. And so there were some, there was, by that time then I could go back to school. The schools were all closed for about a year and a half during the battle action. Then the battle action moved over the city, and then later on there were closed through the miserable conditions there were. Besides this, when the schools opened a year and a half later, finally, there were no teachers there. There were most teachers, if they were not in the army, when they got away from the military, they went to West Germany. They just said that's where they belong. Nobody could prove the difference. They didn't come back to the East because everybody knew what was going on in the East, that the people were starving. So most of our teachers didn't ever come back to the eastern part. But finally the schools opened with a few classes, and of course Russian, they had to take Russian then as a foreign language. Later on they found an English teacher, and we had English, and we had German, and we didn't have any science or math because they just couldn't find any science or math teacher till much later. We were boys and girls together. We were not separated by gender, by boys or girls. Some of the boys in my class, I was in the 11th grade by then. I was in 12th grade by then, because I was just starting to get my final exams. I was in 12th grade by then. And some of our boys decided secretly, very secretly, not telling their parents, not telling their girlfriends, not telling anybody else, not telling anybody in the class. They went to Berlin with this one train. They went to Berlin. There was no Berlin Wall. The Berlin Wall didn't come till 1961. And now we are talking 1946, 47. When you went to Berlin, you could get in with the train into East Berlin, because there was no contact between East and West. But also, since there was no wall, you just crossed the street. You went from one side of the street was East Berlin, on the other side of the street was West Berlin, and nobody cared if you crossed the street. And many people in East Berlin worked in West Berlin, and vice versa. From West Berlin worked in East Berlin, and nobody cared who crossed the street there. So that was very easy for the boys to cross over from East Berlin to West Berlin. In West Berlin, they went to the American consulate or embassy, I don't know, consulate probably, and they told them what was going on in the Soviet Union, in the Soviet section of Germany. And the Americans said, we know that all, but what can we do? We are allies right now, and we cannot tell them what to do. And how old are you anyway? And they said 16, 17. So they said, well, oh yeah, and the boy said, we want to be spies. We want to be spies against the Soviets. And they told them, you can't be a spy. You have to be much older. You have to go to spy school. You have to be trained for years. You have to learn a lot. You cannot possibly be spies. Go home, do your homework, be good boys, and let's see what happens later on when you are grown up. Well, the boys came home, didn't tell anybody, because they didn't tell anybody before. After a few weeks, they decided they go again. They went again. Same thing happened. They sent them back home again. So they came back to Frankfurt again, which is this little Frankfurt, not the big Frankfurt that everybody knows. After a little while, they decided to go for the third time. So this time the Americans said, well, as I told you before, you can't be spies, but you could do something to help us, which eventually hurts the Soviets. If you go home, you don't tell anybody at all what you are doing. You go to the Oder River, divides Frankfurt, this little Frankfurt. And on one side is the Soviet side, on the other side is Poland, because all the land was taken away from Germany, so there was Poland. But everything from Russia, from the Soviet Union, had to come through Poland and Oder the Over River. So they said, you go there by the river, you sit down on a bench, and you have a book. And in the book is a piece of paper and a pencil. And if nobody watches you, you write something down on this paper. Write down if you see a big transport of heavy weapons or something military coming from Poland over the river, Russian, Soviet vehicles. Or you sit in a busy street, in a busy intersection, you do the same thing. And you write down these Soviet vehicles, even the small ones. You write down the license plates of these vehicles. Sounds silly, but it isn't silly, because they had done this all over the Soviet area. And they knew exactly in West Berlin, they knew exactly which license plates belonged to which unit of the Soviet army. And they could control if they were making shifts of big units, or if new units were coming in, or other units were shipped out, or something. They could trace what was going on amongst the Soviet military. So the boys did this. And they say, and then eventually you come back, you bring us your paper, we record it, we throw it away, and you go home and do the same thing over again. That went on for a little while, and they found some more people they could really, really trust, boys, only boys. And they had got some more people participating in this whole operation. After, I really don't know when it started, after several months, one of the people who went to, one of the boys, well, I say boys, they were, 17, 18 years old. One of them went, started flirting with another one's girl. And the other one said to him, you stop seeing my girl immediately. If you don't, I know enough about you. I go to the Soviets and tell them to arrest you. And the other one, he thought he wouldn't be that stupid, because if he goes to the Soviets would say, how do you know about this? You stay right here, my boy. So he did not believe him. Unfortunately, the second one was stupid enough to do this. And this is when it all fell apart. They had these two, these two boys, and they beat them so brutally, almost to death, that they got names out of them for other members who went to Berlin. Of course, all these other members were arrested immediately. House searches were made, and there they found more information. And that information got me in. Hans was one of them who went to Berlin. Never told me, never told anybody. But when they searched his room, they found an address book, an ordinary address book, like everybody who knew as an address book. But the Soviets who found this, they said, aha, Nazi spy organization, what we have here. And eventually they arrested everybody in this address book, including me. So there was, I was arrested in the morning at 6:30. There was a bang against the door, and 2 Soviet officers came, and the translator, and told me to get dressed warmly. That meant to me that I am going to a cold place. And I figured, we had thought about this before amongst us people and with our parents and so forth. We had thought these boys who disappeared and nobody knew what happened to them and where they ended up, they were sent to the Soviet Union into a mine as slave workers or something. This is what we thought. It was wrong, but this was what everybody thought. So now, when they said to me to dress warmly, I figured, no, they take girls too and make us come over as girl slaves to work for them over there. I did dress very warmly. They also told me to take 3 times bedding, sheets and pillowcases and everything in blankets 3 times. And I figured, knowing the Soviets, how they had behaved, how they had raped the woman and stolen everything, you wouldn't dare, when the Soviets are there wearing a gold watch on your arm, they would come right up to you and ask for it, and you give it to them. Because if you don't, you got a bullet in your head. So knowing how they treated us like scum, I didn't take 3 times bedding. I took 1 sheet, 1 blanket, 1 pillowcase, because I knew they would rob me. They would take it anyway. They would take it away from me. Then they took me they brought me into, they put me on a truck, on an open truck. And there were other people sitting there that I knew. Other people from my class, from somebody's address book or something. And we were told not to speak a word, not to look at everybody, just to look at our faces. But when we went up to the truck, we saw the faces and we recognized each other. There were the 2 Miller brothers, Kurt and Eddie Miller, who were in my class. There was Sternchen, who also was in my class. There was Rudi Hoffmann, who was also in my class. Sternchen wrote a book later on, after he was amnestied and came out. He wrote a big book of over 300 pages in German and published it in Germany about what he went through, what I'm talking to you about. Well, when we were sitting on the truck, even if we were looking down, we knew Frankfurt. So we realized, we thought the truck would go right over the Oder River and to Soviet Union. Then we realized we didn't go east, we went west. And we all wondered about this. What was the truth was that we ended up in Potsdam, which is an outskirt of Berlin, and there was an interrogation prison. And this is where all the others that they had arrested were sitting in cells and were interrogated. And this is where we ended up. I ended up in a cell with 1 bed. The cell was about that wide, the length of a bed plus this much for a party. And there was another lady in there. It's an interesting story. how they arrested people besides that case. This lady, Mrs. Finker, her husband was not true. He had a girlfriend. The girlfriend and he decided they wanted to get rid of Mrs. Finken. He was married to him. And they very simply went to the Soviets and they said, Mrs. Finker has said remarks like this, against the Soviet Union and against Stalin, and she is not a good communist citizen. That was enough. They arrested her. She got 25 years hard labor, like everybody else. She didn't survive. She died. Most of the people there died. It was just lucky. It was blessed. That was one case. Another case that's also interesting, when the boys went from Frankfurt to Berlin, oftentimes the trains with the civilians were stopped because some military train had to go through or something, and they were stopped. And they stopped them usually in Fürstenwalde, which is a little township between Frankfurt and Berlin. And they were sometimes told, well, they knew that they couldn't go on this one track, till next day. So there was a Red Cross shelter. And this Red Cross shelter, they had cots there where people could all stay overnight. You had to register, like in a motel, your name and so forth, and the boys they decided to stay there when the train stopped one day, and they knew they wouldn't be able to go on for a long time, for many, many hours. So they stopped there and they spent the night there. They did sign in this book. This guy who ran the Red Cross shelter, Mr. Vogel, in his 60s, he was arrested because they found the names of these boys in the list. They arrested him because they said, you gave them shelter on their unlawful way to Berlin. 25 years, didn't survive, died. That was it. Because in the trials, there was no jury, no defense, nobody but a few officers who were sitting there on the erased thing. They were sitting there. They told you what you did, what a bad boy or girl you are, and they listed all these terrible things that you did. You wouldn't believe what they all had for me, what I all did, all bad things, all invented. But as I say, no jury, no defense. And the same thing with the others, Mr. Vogel and Mrs. What's her name? Mrs. The woman with the lover they put her in. That happened on March 29th, 30th, and 31st. They had put together 27 out of this organization. There was this underground movement, which of course I had no idea about, but they called it an organized spy organization. And there were 7. There was Mr. Vogel, there were all the boys, there was Heinz, there was Hans, there were the twin brothers, or the Millers. They were all there. And we were told, and since there were so many people, and with each single one, They had so much, the Soviets, they had so much to say to us, so much to read to us, all the paragraphs under which we have sinned and so forth. This is why it took 3 days. On the third day, March 31st, we all got our sentences, and everybody, regardless, got 25 years, hard labor, or concentration camp, whichever they pleased to do, in Russia or in Germany. Some were sent to the Soviet Union. I was lucky, I never went to the Soviet Union. I stayed in Germany. Everybody 25 years, except for one. And you know exactly who is the one. The one who started the whole thing rolling, the girlfriend issue. He got 10 years. He didn't survive either, starved to death in the camp, got TBC, died, never saw the light again, since the very day when he went to the Soviets and told them about this other boy. They never let him out again. So then came the great day of joy when we all, the girls, the women, when we all got together in one big cell, because we were all isolated. They take great care that we would not have one cell next to the other, and there would be two, in 2 cells, one wall, because in prison you communicate through the wall. You knock. And this is the communication in the prisons. 1 knock is A, 2 knocks is B. And so you spell out a word, and after the word is spelled, you scratch on the wall. That means the end of the word. It takes ages. But who had more time than we did? So eventually, you got all kinds of things to know about your neighbors. They got to know about us. And this is the reason that they never put 2 of the same case next to each other. They even separated me from my girlfriend Inge by floors. They didn't put her on the same floor like I did, and not directly under me, under my cell, because you also could knock through to the heating pipes. You could get in touch with the cell over you and the cell under you. You could knock and do the same thing. You tell them in which cell you are, and so they took care. They took great care that 2 of the same case were not sitting one above the other. Then after about a week or so, we came on transport, and the transport went, again we were afraid. We were afraid that the transport would go to the east and we would end up in the Soviet Union. Again, the transport went west, to our great delight. And we ended up in Bautzen. Bautzen is a small town where there is a castle up on the mountain, and the castle is now high security prison, but it's not really high up, it's a hill more or less. And this is where we were. And it was good there, good compared to the circumstances. In Potsdam, we got 1 piece of bread, dry bread, in the morning, a cup of coffee, without sugar or anything, well, more than a cup of coffee. And then at lunch and for dinner, we got soup, what they called soup. It really was hot water with some grease bubbles swimming on the top. There were supposed to be vegetables and a little bit meat in it, but all the kitchen crew were prisoners. And you know who ate the meat and the vegetables. So nothing got ever to the cells. Nothing what we ever got. If you were very lucky, maybe you had half a potato in that water. It was very hot, but nothing in it, just water, greasy water. And this is what we got for lunch and what we got for dinner. And sometimes it was so hot that we couldn't eat it, and they already collected the bowls. And after a little while. In Bautzen, the food was a little better. We got this one piece of bread, it was a little bigger. We got a little cup, a little container of jam. We got a little container of sugar. We got a little container of margarine. So that was luxury. And the soup was really not that bad. It was just water. It was like a thin stew, so to speak. Of course, never any meat. The meat was always eaten by the kitchen crew. But at least there were some vegetables in it, and it was a little thicker. So the food was a little better. And also, in Potsdam, we never saw fresh air. But in Bautzen, they let us go out. There were guards guarding us, and we had to go side by side too, and we could speak with each other. We also could speak with each other in the cells because they left the doors open sometimes for several hours, and we could walk in the hallways and see other friends in other cells. So that was another plus for us, another improvement for us. And when we walked, it was about a half an hour or something, they let us walk in a courtyard around there, and you couldn't run away anyway because there were many, many buildings. Ours was the only building for women, but there were many, many more buildings for men. And then outside of the whole campus was a big high wall with barbed wire, electrified and so forth. There was no chance of running away or anything. And besides the guards, the Soviet guards who were watching us, they had rifles and they had a dog, and they could have shot us. So everything, nobody ever tried to run away or escape or anything like this. Unfortunately, it was too bad, but we only stayed there for several months. And then came this terrible, terrible transport from Bautzen to the Nazi concentration camp of Sachsenhausen outside of Berlin. It was a 3-day trip in cattle cars, no food, no water, nothing to drink for 3 days. Again, the train was stopped for a long time, for hours, because another train had to go by or something like this. One woman died in our cattle car. And we knocked at the door. The Soviet guards came, they opened the door that wide, and they asked in Russian, what's the matter? And somebody could speak Russian. Told them there's a dead woman here. So they closed the door. And they came back with a whole group of armed soldiers surrounding the door entrance. One of them stepped in and they shoot us to the sides. He stepped in, took the woman, by a leg, threw her out into the cornfield that just was there, and dumped her down. She fell down like a stone. That was it. That's where she ended up. And they closed the door again. I mean, one German less. What's the difference? No, it didn't matter to them. There were 2 barrels in this cattle car. One was with rancid, dirty water, which was supposed to be for drinking. Inge and I, we never touched it. We thought we'd rather suffer being thirsty as drinking this and getting sick. So we never touched it. The second barrel was it's a toilet barrel. It was a barrel about that high for about 50 or so women. That thing was full in the shortest of time. Then it swapped over. And there were, at both ends of the cattle car, there were boards where we could lie on. There were 3 boards where you could lie on. And not everybody had room. We could not lie side by side. We lay there on the side, everybody on the same side, because more people fitted onto the board. And every time that somebody had to turn, the whole row of people had to turn on the other side. There was no other way. Because if we hadn't done this, we would have ended up on the urine-wet floor, like some of the people did, because they couldn't stand upright the whole night through. And nobody was giving them this place to lie down. It was just awful. I think that wasn't the worst thing. It was just terrible. After 3 days, we arrived in Sachsenhausen, this old concentration camp, and most of the Americans, almost all Americans, have no idea that the Soviets took over the Nazi concentration camps. They left some, like the most famous ones that everybody knows the names, to show the people. That's what the bad Nazis did, the ovens where they burned the bodies and all that. But only a few. And all the others, there were hundreds, all the others, they just kept for themselves, let the Jews get out, and the homosexuals and lesbians and whomever they had in there, the Nazis, they shoot them out, they got free. They filled the concentration camps again with anti-communist people, or people as Mrs. Finke, who was told she is anti-communist, with people like that. They were, or Mr. Vogel, something like that. And they filled the concentration camps right away. I was in the women's section. The women's section had, I think there were 15 barracks. No, there must have been 14 or 16 because they were on each side. And in the middle was a free space where we had to be for appel. Appel is when they counted. We were mixed with criminals. Not all were political people. We were mixed with murderers and thieves and other criminals. In each barrack, in my barrack, each barrack had about 150 people. The beds were 2, one on the bottom, one on the top. Each one had his own bed, like we had in Bautzen. In Bautzen we had our own bed too. Not like like in Potsdam and like later on. Each one had his own bed, and the food wasn't too bad. It was about the same like in Bautzen, with the bread and the soup not too bad. No meat, never. In all my life, in all my imprisonment, I've never seen a piece of meat. But at least there were some vegetables and potatoes in it. And just enough for you to survive. I weighed 89 pounds through the concentration camp time with my incarceration, which I know because once in a while they weighed us. Don't ask me why. They weighed us. Probably there was a statistic or something like this, I don't know. But they weighed us. And then I knew, this is how I knew that I was weighing 89 pounds. Now we were in Sachsenhausen. The good thing in Sachsenhausen was fresh air, even more fresh air than in Bautzen, because at the barracks, at each barrack there was one inmate guard. She wouldn't let anybody go out during nighttime. But during the day, the doors were open and everybody could walk around, and the weather was nice. We were sitting in the sunshine all day on, except when we had appel twice a day. Appel, they ring a bell, and then you had to get out, and we were standing 10 behind each other, 10 rows of 10, and this is the way they could easily count them. You know, they saw there were 10. And then the barrack, elderly male, elderly people, whoever was top dog, you know, the one who said guard during the night, he would tell them whoever was out for work or out in the ambulance or was sick or something like this. So that was pretty bearable there in Sachsenhausen. And then came the big surprise. We had never had any contact with the outside world. I didn't know. I didn't know if my parents were alive or dead or what. They didn't know if I was alive or dead. They pictured me in Siberia somewhere or in Soviet Union somewhere. One day in Sachsenhausen came an officer. We only saw an officer, a Soviet officer, twice a day for appel. They only came for appel. One day an officer came between the time and he said, I can tell you, to an interpreter, I can tell you that I have a very good news for you. You can write a letter home. He expected a big, joyous response. Dead silence. Nobody believed him. Nobody would believe a Soviet anything. We didn't believe it. Then once, in the back, I don't know, I was feeling when the friend said, they just want to find out what we think and sentence us anew. And then we all started laughing. And the whole bunch of women, we all laughed and laughed and laughed. We didn't believe it. So the officer he couldn't believe what was happening there. And he turned around and went away. And we still laughed after he had left. We didn't even believe that they would give us paper to write home. Indeed, next week, there came a shipment of papers and pencils. We were allowed to write one letter home. We still didn't, nobody believed that, except for the criminals. Again, we were mixed with criminal people who were sentenced for crimes. They, of course, believed everything because they had nothing to do with the Soviets. But the Soviet sentenced people, nobody believed that they would ever get home. And we were told certain rules and regulations. We were not allowed to speak about our case, that we were spies. We were not allowed to talk about conditions in the camp. We were not allowed to mention any other name of that we were there, and so forth. There were a number of rules they gave us. And so it was a wonderful entertainment to write to my parents, tell them how much I loved them, and that, oh yeah, the whole letter was full of lies, of course. I wrote them how well I am, and that I have wonderful food, and it's always warm, which was not the case. In the winter we froze terribly sometimes, in all places, because they didn't have anything to make the heating going. And so forth. And I filled the letter, and it was fun talking to my parents like this, even though I didn't believe they would ever read it. Well, 3 or 4 weeks went by, and answers came in Sachsenhausen. Now we knew that these letters really had been delivered home, and we found out what was going on outside. I learned that my parents were still alive, were still living there where we had been living before. They knew that I was not in Russia, because the letter came from Berlin. And of course I couldn't write them anything, more details or anything. My dad wrote on his calendar, he had such a calendar where you flip every day, flip the page, and he wrote on this calendar piece, "Thank God she is alive. My daughter is alive." And he framed that. I still have it, that piece of calendar there. I forgot to tell you something about my secret letter in Potsdam. In Potsdam, in the interrogation prison, I wanted somehow to let my parents know that I wasn't in Russia. But we had no paper, we had no pen, or nothing. So I invented something. We had straw, we had a straw sack. On the bed was a straw sack, filled with mostly whatever you call it, if the straw is completely frizzled up in little tiny pieces and dust. But there were pieces of straw. I pulled one of the pieces of straw out. I pulled several out. One was too thick, one was too thin, till I had the right one. Then I rubbed this thing on the cement floor in an angle like this. I had plenty of time. So I rubbed and rubbed and rubbed and rubbed till there was a little point on this end of the straw. And I said to Mrs. Finke, "Look, I got my pen." And she said, "Okay, and what do you do for ink?" Well, I before this, I had complained once a month, once in a great while. Sanitäter came by, a person from the health department with creams and salves or something like this. And I complained that I am sore and I wanted a little Vaseline. So he gave me a blob of Vaseline, and luckily he put the Vaseline on this piece of paper on the side, on an end. So I could tear it off, and I had the rest of the paper to write my letter on. But no, what for ink? Mrs. Finkel, you know, being 86, you can't think of names anymore. Mrs. Finkel had a pin that they had not discovered. Pins and knives and forks and all this was forbidden in there so that they couldn't hurt anybody or themselves. They didn't want to make anybody suicide because they wanted the informations. But she had a pin in her inside of her clothing, and nobody had seen it. So I took this pin and I punched a hole in my little finger here, and I pressed, and out came a drop of blood. And I said to her, "See, this is my ink." So I dipped my straw pen into the ink, and I wrote the first letter. And then the ink was gone, the blood was gone. There wasn't enough ink in there. So I wrote the first letter. So I did this again, dipped my pen in, wrote the next letter. Took ages, but finally I got something on this little piece of paper there. "My dear parents, I'm fine, I'm not hungry, it's warm here," you know, the old stories over again. And then Mrs. Finkel said, "So, okay, now you got your letter. How do you get it out?" Of course, that was an impossibility. I hoped that, I mean, you're crazy at this time. I hope that somebody was in the neighboring cell, maybe a criminal, and would go out, because the criminals, if they didn't have enough evidence or they didn't steal a lot of things, they let them go out, they let them go home. And I hope that I could maneuver my letter to them. That was possible because twice a day we had to take our potty to the potty cell where we could wash our hands. And in the potty cell there were shelves and niches and corners where you could hide something. And then you would knock at the door and tell them, "This is hidden there, you know, pick it up and take it home." Of course, this was all in my crazy mind. It never happened. So the letter never got out. So finally, my parents found it. I have the letter. But that was much later. Sachsenhausen. It was known that the food was much better for the sick people who were sick, and they had softer straw sacks too, not just spray. I was covered with ulcers from the hunger on my legs, and so my friend Inge, we grew up since kindergarten, and we were arrested together on the same day. She said, "Why don't you try? Maybe they take you to the sick people's barrack." I tried, it worked. They let me get in. And that was wonderful. I spent several months in there. My wounds didn't take that long to heal, but I helped a little bit with that. The blanket was very, very dirty that I had, and so as soon as it started healing, I rubbed the blanket, the dirty blanket, on my wounds, and so it didn't heal. The nurses, and they came, and looked, they were surprised, but I think they knew what I did. I mean, they were all prisoners too. All the nurses were prisoners. All the doctors were prisoners themselves. I think they guessed what I had done. So I dragged it out for 2 or 3 months. I dragged it out to stay in there with the good food. I put on some weight and was very happy in there. I had a companion in my room. She had very, very bad tuberculosis, and I never heard of her before. She probably died. And she was very learned. She was a professor, and so we recited poetry together and things like this. It was very enjoyable. One day, the rumors circulated that there would be a transport from Sachsenhausen. Sachsenhausen was supposed to become men only. And there also was a rumor that some people would go home. Of course, we didn't think. People with 25 years hard labor wouldn't go home naturally, you know. But we thought the criminals may go home. And they did. They got an amnesty, and many of them went home. The next station was Hoheneck, and that was the hell of all the times. The German the German communists in the section. How long am I supposed to speak?
Everybody okay with a little bit more?
Yeah.
Hoheneck also was a castle, also has become prison, high security prison now, still is, now for criminals. I mean now after the fall of the wall. The German communists had shown so wonderful communist attitudes and everything that the Soviets decided they can be trusted to take over us prisoners, because they had no say for anything. But they let them take over to guard us. So Hoheneck was run by German communists, by German communist police, which is just a side branch of the Stasi. And I have never seen in the years before, in the 2 years before, so many vicious, bad people like those German guards. They were so brainwashed. Daily workshops where they told them that we are trash, that we are all Nazis, because if we were not communists, we had to be Nazis. We all were Nazis, and we all the political sentence ones were Nazis. We were all responsible for the Jews, for the concentration camps, for the murders. This all lay on our shoulders like on anybody else's. We were trash. We were not worth to be treated nicely or anything. And everybody of the guards who wanted to treat us nicely was punished themselves. As one of the guards, she ended up in Hoheneck herself because she had been so nice. 2. I knew in 6 years of this hell, I knew 2 of them. They were nice. Both of them ended up in Hoheneck themselves after I wasn't there anymore. One of them came to, there were cells and there were rooms rooms with 150 people in it at this time. They shifted us around so that no riots could develop and so forth. At this time I was in a cell, and she was a beautiful young blonde lady, and she came to the cell. She said, "Can anybody make a nice embroidered tablecloth for a wedding? You have plenty of time." And I always liked handiwork, and I watched my mother doing stitchery and so forth. So I said, yeah, I can do this. Of course, I had no idea what I would do, but it gave us the scissors to clean our nails. It gave us a needle to fix our clothes. It gave us white thread and so forth. So I started, and it truly became a masterpiece. I made a design in the middle. I pulled threads out of the material, but this goes too far, this takes too long. Anyway, it was a beautiful piece, and I cried my heart out when I had to hand it over, and I knew I would never see it again. She was the one who was later on too nice to, so that she was imprisoned herself as a non-communist political enemy. The other one that was nice was a guard who put a sandwich with meat in it in a paper bag, and she put it in the corner by the door. And this is where the staircase was going, where they were unloading bread from the inner courtyard so that they couldn't run away. They were unloading loaves of bread into the house, to the kitchen, the supply room. And she said to one of the prisoners, whom she liked very much, she said, "I put a sandwich there for you." And Gerda was her name. And Gerda took the sandwich and she put it under her uniform. And when she came back to she lived in the cell house. So when she came back to the cell house, she was searched, and the guard fed this bundle, and she took the sandwich. That was it. Now the next day, she was put on display on a table in the courtyard, all the prisoners around. And the director of the prison, he said, "This is Gerda Schumacher. She stole a sandwich from one of our guards." She had admitted to this, because when she was asked, they told her, "You stole the sandwich." And she said, "Yes, I did." Because if she wouldn't, this guard would have ended up immediately being sentenced. So she lied about that, and now this director was standing there making a big speech, "This is Gerda Schumacher, the thief among you, who steals food from our good guards." She was supposed to go into Karze. Karze was little cells in the basement, without a window, without light, dark all day long, and then she would get a piece of bread every second day, and that's it, and water. She happened to lie in the cell next to me. So this is how I know the whole story and what had happened before. We knocked, and she told me the whole story. And she said, "I can't live with this by hundreds and hundreds of people, 1,000 people considered a thief, taking a sandwich away I can't stand it. I can't tolerate this idea. Next morning, we heard the guards coming in the morning, looking through the little peephole if everything is all right. And we heard the steps, and the steps stopped next door at the cellar. And we heard, you can hear the big halls there, you can hear what they say. And she said, "Oh my God," and she ran away. Then she came back, probably she came back with others, and we found out from the conversation they had amongst each other that Gerda had torn her sheet into strips and hanged herself on the heating pipe, and she was dead. That was the second good God that I know, and that's it. They were so bad, telling us all the time, cursing us, telling us what murderers we are. And we said, why murderers? And they said, "You were," and they told us all the stories they had learned in the workshops there. But these two were good, and they had to pay for it. I was called to the office, and I was told that my sentence of 25 years was reduced by the gracious Soviet administration, that I have now 10 years. I had 8.5, so I figured, okay, I can do that, And then other days I said, can I really stand this here, this abuse every day and every day? But I didn't have to wait that long, because I was amnestied to go home before that. There was a president, you may not know that, he was the first president in West Germany. His name was Konrad Adenauer, and he probably was the greatest leader Germany had since Frederick the Great and Bismarck. Adenauer was probably the greatest after that. In the meantime, Germany had become so rich, they didn't have enough workers for all the factories that they built. They went to the underprivileged southern states, Italy, Spain, Yugoslavia, Turkey, and so forth, offered them good pay, free meals, free sleeping, free housing, and so forth. Come and work for us. And they came, and they came, and they came by the thousands. And then came their wives with their 8, 10, 12 little children. And they all were covered by the German health system, free medicine and so forth. So by that time, the Germans had it. So I don't want to go any further into politics, but when I came out, my mother was still there. My father was not there, because my father had also been arrested as an anti-communist, because there were several reasons. He was a black sheep anyway in their list. He could never keep his mouth shut, and he said sometimes political things that other people carried somewhere else. He also had a well-going business, and they had bombarded him with requests to hand over the business to the government and become the director of the business. And my father said, no way, this is mine. And they couldn't force him. And after German law, they could not force him. And on top of everything else, he had written letters to beg for pardon for me. And he had also had these letters translated into Russian and sent them to Moscow. So finally they have had it, and they arrested him for no reason whatsoever. I don't want to go into this, it takes too long. So he wasn't home. So then I stayed with my mother, and I felt so insecure. All my mail was opened when I got mail. When there was a knock at the door, I thought they'd come again and arrest me again for an unknown reason. So I decided my mother didn't want to come with me because she wanted to wait for my dad. He had another 6 months, and then he would come out, and they both would follow me. But I decided it was time for me to go to West Berlin, which I could do just like the boys had done. But I didn't go to the consulate. I just went after the refugee with the clothes on my back. And the West Berliners, they were absolutely fantastic. They were absolutely fantastic to me. The Catholic Church, the Protestant Church, the Jewish synagogue, the government, everybody came, gave me clothes, gave me money. They put an ad in the paper about my fixer. People wrote to me a class on the Rhine in Bonn, a class, their teacher read them this article in the paper. They collected money. They made money-making projects. They sent me this money. I finally eventually went to visit them. And so I was really taken care of. And the government asked me what to do now. I was 28, so I had two choices, either to get married or get a career. I did not even have high school diploma because the Soviets had all taken all my papers from the school and never returned them. I couldn't get married because I didn't know anybody. There weren't very many choices because so many people my age too, they had been killed in the war or by bombs. So I decided on a career. So the government put me into an orphanage in West Germany, where everything was paid for me, where I could go back to school because I needed a high school diploma. So I had to go back to school and review because 8.5 years, no book, no paper, nothing. You forget, after 8 years. I didn't know any English or Latin anymore. So I went back in Wuppertal, I went back to high school. I was sitting with the 18, 19-year-olds together in the same class. And then I needed 6 months to review, and the teachers were wonderful to me, to help me. And then I took the final exam, and everybody else took the final exam. And the final high school exam in Germany is a college entrance exam. You do not have college entrance exams because the final high school exam is so difficult that you don't need anything else. You have to write, in a final high school exam, you have to write 5 papers, each one 5 or 6 hours long, in inclusion in the classroom. I wrote German, English, and Latin, but I could not write math and science anymore because then they had arrested me. I also didn't have any proof that I did have that I had written the first 3 papers because the Soviets had taken it all and thrown it away, or put it in Moscow somewhere, some kind of archive or something. So I went back to school, and then I finally started my career at the Frankfurt University. I became a teacher. I taught in Germany, and in the meantime, I had started a correspondence with an American because English was my major. We had to do something else but book learning and writing English. We had to do something practical. So we had to have a correspondence. And if you didn't know anybody, they found us somebody. So I had this correspondence with a man in Würzburg, and later on this became my husband. Then when I came here, I could not teach English anymore, what I did in Germany, because English is the mother tongue here, and you teach a mother tongue completely differently than a foreign language. In foreign language, vocabulary is the first and last thing, the most important thing. Now, in the mother language, you have to teach literature and Chaucer and this and that, you know. So I would never have gotten permission to do that. But I knew what to teach a foreign language. So now I could teach German here. And I taught 33 and a half years in Lower Dauphin till my salary got too high, and they wanted to get rid of me. And they did anything and everything in the world to get rid of me, to hire a college graduate for half my salary or less. So I looked around for something else. They made my life really miserable. And I found something else, and I taught 11 and a half years at Wilson College in Chambersburg, then till I retired when I was 78 years old, and I thought this was a good age to retire.
Sorry?
Shall I mention this book?
Would you like to mention this book?
Somebody thought it worthwhile to write a biography, but that was many years ago, and it's long sold out at the publisher. The only place you can get it is over Amazon.com, where you still can get it. But I have pictures here, what I look like. What?
Your microphone makes too much noise.
This is me when I was before the arrest, and this is Inge. We lived up like sisters together. And this is Wilson, this is Warneck, the prison. This is me when I was in the state. And this is a group picture.
Wow, I encourage you to come see this. Before we go, I have two things. One, of course, please visit our helmet committee. It's very important.
You get these out of print books. Amazon, yeah, like Abe Lincoln, yeah, ABE, Abe Books.
Books,
Yeah.
Okay.